She was only 23 years old when she was forced to marry a 42-year-old man known for his coldness and cruelty in business. Emily believed it would be nothing more than a cold arrangement, without feelings, but on the first night in Cape Haven, when she revealed she was a virgin, something changed in his grey eyes, and in that moment, everything was transformed forever. If this story touched you, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're listening to this story from. Your support is what motivates us to keep bringing you romances that warm the heart. The sun was setting over Cape Haven when Emily finally managed to breathe after hours of pretending to be happy. The wedding was over, the guests had left, and now it was just her and Liam at North Carolina's most exclusive resort. Her high heels lay abandoned in the corner of the presidential suite, and she massaged her aching feet while watching the ocean through the panoramic window. Tired? Liam's deep voice made her turn around. He had removed his jacket and loosened his tie, but still maintained that rigid posture that defined him. At 42, Liam Blackwood was everything the business magazines described: imposing, calculating, and absolutely unreachable. Dark hair with silver threads at his temples, grey eyes that seemed to see right through people, and a presence that commanded any room. A little, she admitted, trying not to show the nervousness that had been consuming her since they'd entered the room. "It's been a long day," Liam nodded, pouring himself a whiskey from the suite's bar. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with unspoken expectations. Emily knew exactly why she was there. The marriage contract had been clear. She would be the perfect wife in public. He would guarantee her family's financial stability. Simple, straightforward, no emotional complications. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked, noticing how she nervously played with the wedding ring that still felt strange on her finger. "Maybe some water," she murmured, watching him move through the suite with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling every situation. When he handed her the glass, their fingers touched briefly. Emily felt an unexpected shiver run up her spine. There was something in the way he looked at her, not with the coldness he showed the rest of the world, but with a genuine curiosity that left her unsettled. "Emily," he said her name in a way she'd never heard before, as if testing how it sounded on his lips. "We need to talk about expectations." She swallowed hard. She knew this moment would come. "I understand the agreement, Liam. You don't need to worry." "It's not about the agreement." He moved closer, and she could smell his woody cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. "It's about tonight." Emily's heart raced. She had tried to prepare herself mentally for this moment, but now, with him so close, all her certainties seemed to crumble. She began, but the words were lost when she saw his expression change. The mask of absolute control slipped for an instant, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. "You're scared," he observed, not as a question, but as a gentle statement. Emily nodded, unable to lie. "A little." Liam stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "You don't need to be. I'm not the monster they paint me as in the newspapers, at least not with you." "I know that," she said quickly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "I mean, I hope you're not." An almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Honesty, that's refreshing." Emily felt her cheeks flush. "My mother always said I talk too much when I'm nervous." "And are you nervous now?" "Very," she admitted, laughing nervously. "That's pretty obvious, isn't it?" Liam studied her face for a long moment. There was something about her that intrigued him, a combination of vulnerability and strength he hadn't expected to find. When his lawyers had presented her profile, he saw only numbers: age, education, family. But the woman standing before him was far more complex than any report could capture. "Emily," he said softly, "there's something you need to know about me. I don't do anything halfway. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." She stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that regardless of how this marriage started, while we're together, you will be respected, protected, cared for." He paused, his grey eyes intensifying. "I would never force a woman to do something she didn't want to do." The relief Emily felt was so intense, her legs almost gave out. She had spent weeks imagining terrible scenarios, fearing he would be cruel or indifferent. But there was something in the way he spoke, in the sincerity in his eyes, that reassured her. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot to me." "There's one more thing," he said, hesitating for the first time since she'd known him. I don't have much practice at being gentle. My life has been about business, contracts, strategies. This," he gestured between them, "is new for me too." Emily blinked, surprised by the unexpected vulnerability. The powerful man who commanded business empires was admitting uncertainty, and that made him infinitely more human in her eyes. "Maybe we can figure it out together," she suggested timidly. Something changed in Liam's expression at that moment. The tension in his shoulders eased, and when he looked at her again, there was a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Yes," he agreed. "Maybe we can." The silence that followed was different, less charged with anxiety and more full of possibilities. Emily felt she had crossed some kind of invisible line, moving from the territory of fear into something she couldn't name yet. "Liam," she called softly. "Yes?" "There's something you need to know about me, too." She took a deep breath, gathering courage. I've never been with a man before." The words hung in the air between them like a sacred confession. Liam went completely still, his eyes widening slightly as he processed what she had said. "You mean that I'm a virgin?" she completed, her cheeks burning but her gaze steady. "I know that probably wasn't what you expected in an arrangement like this, but I couldn't go through with this without you knowing." Liam was silent for so long that Emily began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe he would change his mind about everything. Maybe the deal would be cancelled. Maybe... "Emily?" His voice came out rougher than usual, loaded with an emotion she couldn't decipher. "Look at me." She raised her eyes, expecting to see disappointment or irritation, but what she found left her breathless. There was something in Liam's grey eyes that seemed like a mixture of admiration, protection, and something much deeper that she didn't dare name. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. That changes everything." "Changes how?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Liam approached again, but this time his movements were different, more careful, more reverent. "It changes because now I know that tonight isn't just about the two of us. It's about you trusting me with something precious." And in that moment, as the ocean whispered outside and the stars began to appear in Cape Haven's sky, Emily felt something shifting inside her. The cold, calculating man she had feared had disappeared, replaced by someone who looked at her as if she were the most valuable thing he had ever found. But as the night deepened around them, one question remained in the air, unspoken but present in every look they exchanged. What would happen when the sun rose and they had to return to the real world, where contracts mattered more than budding feelings? Breakfast on the resort terrace should have been romantic. The ocean view was breathtaking. The morning breeze carried the salty scent of the sea, and golden rays of sunlight danced on the crystal-clear water. But the tension between Liam and Emily was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Liam sat across the table, impeccable in his white shirt and tailored pants, reading emails on his tablet as if it were an ordinary work morning. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and there was no trace of the vulnerability he had shown the night before. It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming him back into the ruthless businessman the world knew. Emily absent-mindedly stirred the berries on her plate, still processing what had happened between them a few hours earlier. The memory of his gentle hands, of his voice whispering sweet words in the dark, of how he had taken care of every detail to make her feel safe. All of it seemed like a dream compared to the cold man who was now completely ignoring her. "Liam," she tried, hoping to capture his attention. He looked up for a moment, his expression polite but distant. "Yes?" "About last night," she began, but he interrupted her by raising his hand. "We need to establish some rules," he said, setting the tablet aside and leaning back in his chair. His voice was businesslike, professional, as if he were conducting a business meeting. "Now that we've consummated the marriage, it's important that we both understand the expectations moving forward." Emily felt like she'd been slapped. Consummated the marriage? Was that how he referred to the most intimate and transformative night of her life? "Expectations," she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. "In public, we'll be the perfect couple. Smiles, affectionate gestures, everything expected of newlyweds." Liam enumerated the points as if they were contract clauses. Social appearances, charity events, business dinners. You'll be charming, elegant, the ideal wife. Emily nodded slowly, though each word felt like a stone in her stomach. And in private? In private, we maintain our distance. The answer came quickly, definitively. Separate rooms, separate lives. What happened yesterday was necessary to validate the marriage, but it doesn't need to happen again. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt her cheeks burning with humiliation and anger. How could he reduce something so beautiful and meaningful to mere validation? "I see," she said finally, surprising herself with the coldness in her own voice. "So I'm just a very well-paid employee." Liam looked at her sharply, something dangerous glinting in his grey eyes. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" Emily stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. "You treated me like I was something precious last night, and this morning you're telling me it was just business. If that's not reason for drama, I don't know what is." "Emily." His voice carried a warning tone that she chose to ignore. "No." She planted her hands on the table, leaning toward him. "You can't just erase what happened between us. You can't pretend you didn't feel anything." For a moment, Liam's mask slipped. She saw the internal struggle in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened, how his fists clenched around the napkin. But when he spoke again, his voice was perfectly controlled. "What I felt or didn't feel is irrelevant. This is a business arrangement, Emily. The sooner you accept that, the better for both of us." The wound was so deep she almost staggered. But instead of crying or begging, something stronger awakened within her. Pride, determination, an absolute refusal to be reduced to a mere object in his power game. "Fine," she said, straightening her shoulders. "If that's how you want to play it, then let's play." Liam raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this reaction. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're going to get exactly what you asked for, a perfect wife in public, distant in private, but don't expect me to be grateful for it." She grabbed her purse and headed for the terrace door. "When do you want to go back to Asheville?" "Our flight leaves at 3, he replied, visibly uncomfortable with the sudden change in her behavior. "Perfect. I'll spend the morning at the spa. I need to prepare for my new role." She paused at the door, turning to face him. "By the way, Liam, you can pretend last night didn't mean anything, but we both know you're lying. The question is, why?" With that, she left, leaving him alone on the terrace with his thoughts and the uncomfortable feeling that he had just lost something important without even understanding what it was. The next few hours passed in a careful dance of mutual avoidance. Emily spent the morning at the spa, letting professional masseuses relieve the tension in her muscles while her mind worked furiously. She wasn't stupid. She knew there was something more behind Liam's behavior. Men didn't change from hot to cold without a reason. When they met in the lobby for checkout, she looked impeccable. Navy blue midi dress, hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, makeup subtle but perfect. The ideal trophy wife, exactly as he had requested. "You look beautiful," Liam said automatically, but there was something in his voice that suggested the words had escaped before he could censor them. "Thank you," she replied politely, as if speaking to a stranger. "Shall we?" The flight back to Asheville was tense. They sat in Liam's private jet like two polite acquaintances, exchanging occasional pleasantries while he worked, and she pretended to read a magazine. But beneath the polished surface, an electric current ran through the space between them. Liam found himself watching her from the corner of his eye, noticing how she bit her lower lip when she was thoughtful, how her fingers drummed nervously against the leather armrest. There were moments when he opened his mouth to say something, apologize perhaps or explain, but then he remembered why he had imposed those rules in the first place. Emily, for her part, was hyper-aware of his every movement. When he got up to get water, she noticed how the muscles in his back moved under his shirt. When he ran his hand through his hair in frustration over some email, she remembered how she had felt those same fingers on her skin the night before. "Are you okay?" he asked, when he noticed she had become very quiet. "Perfectly fine," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just thinking about my new role. I want to make sure I exceed expectations." There was something in the way she said it that made Liam shift uncomfortably in his seat. He had gotten what he wanted: distance, control, boundaries. So why did he feel like he had just made the biggest mistake of his life? When they landed in Asheville, the reality of their new life hit them full force. The limousine took them through the city to Liam's mountain property, an imposing mansion that dominated the valley below like a modern castle. It was impressive, intimidating, and completely lifeless. "Welcome home," Liam said as they climbed the marble steps of the main entrance. Home. The word sounded strange coming from him, as if he didn't really believe in it himself. Emily looked around the entrance hall. High ceilings, contemporary art on the walls, everything impeccably decorated and absolutely impersonal. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your room," Liam said, gesturing to an elegant Asian woman who had appeared as if materialized from thin air. "She takes care of the house. If you need anything, you can ask her." "Is my room far from yours?" Emily asked, and there was an edge in her voice that made his expression harden. "Opposite sides of the house," he confirmed. "You'll have complete privacy." "Perfect." She turned to Mrs. Chen with a genuine smile. "I'd love to see it if you don't mind." As they climbed the curved staircase, Liam stood in the hall watching them disappear. The house, which had always been his sanctuary, suddenly seemed too big and too empty. In the room that would be hers, Emily stood at the window, looking down at the impeccably maintained garden below. It was beautiful, she had to admit, but beauty without warmth was just a pretty prison. "Mr. Blackwood is a good man," Mrs. Chen said softly, as if she could read her thoughts. "Just careful. Very careful." Emily turned to look at the older woman. "Careful about what?" Mrs. Chen hesitated, then just shook her head. "It's not my place to say. But," she paused, "sometimes the most careful people are the ones who most need someone to make them feel safe." With those enigmatic words, she left, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that there was much more to Liam Blackwood than he allowed anyone to see. The question was she willing to fight through his defenses to discover what was hidden underneath? Outside her window, storm clouds began to gather on the horizon, promising that the calm after their wedding night was about to end. 3 weeks, 21 days of polite, distant coexistence, 21 days of silent dinners, formal greetings in the mansion's hallways, and lonely nights in separate rooms. Emily was starting to feel like a ghost in her own life, floating through the luxurious rooms without leaving any mark. The routine was always the same. Liam left for the office before 7 in the morning and returned after 9 at night. When they were in the same room, he was courteous but distant, as if she were a permanent guest whose presence he had grown accustomed to tolerating. She in turn kept the promise made in Cape Haven. She was the perfect wife in public and completely invisible in private. But beneath the polished surface, both were falling apart. On that particular Thursday, Emily was in the library when she heard footsteps on the marble staircase. It was only 4 in the afternoon, too early to be Liam. She hid behind the tall bookshelves, curious, and saw him appear in the library entrance with his tie loose and an exhausted expression she had never seen before. He headed directly to the bar in the corner of the room, pouring himself a generous whiskey before throwing himself into the leather armchair near the fireplace. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring into the amber liquid as if it contained answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Emily hesitated. Over the past 3 weeks, they had maintained a careful dance of mutual avoidance. But something in his posture, the way his shoulders fell, how his head rested against the back of the chair, touched her deeply. "Rough day?" she asked softly, stepping out from behind the shelves. Liam jerked, spilling some of the whiskey. "Jesus, Emily, I didn't know you were here." "Sorry, I was reading." She gestured vaguely to the book in her hands. You look tired." For a moment she thought he would dismiss her with one of his polite but distant responses. But then something shifted in his expression, and he gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit," he said quietly, "if you want to." It was the first real invitation he had made since they returned from Cape Haven. Emily set the book aside and settled into the chair, suddenly aware of how intimate the situation was. Just the two of them in the library, gilded by the late afternoon sun, with the rest of the massive house quiet around them. "Bad meeting?" she tried again. Liam took a long sip of the whiskey before answering. "Something like that. Sometimes I wonder why I work so hard to build something that could disappear overnight." There was a rawness in his voice that made her lean forward. "What do you mean?" He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing whether or not to trust her with whatever was eating him up inside. "Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought loved you?" he asked finally. The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Emily felt her heart start to race, sensing they were approaching something dangerous and important. "No," she answered honestly. "But I can imagine how devastating that would be." Liam nodded slowly. "I thought I could imagine too, until it happened to me." He stood up abruptly, walking to the large window that overlooked the gardens. With his back to her, shoulders tense, he looked like a man preparing for war, or maybe remembering one he had already lost. "Her name was Deborah," he said, his voice so quiet that Emily had to strain to hear him. "We were married for 5 years. I thought I knew her." Emily felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known that Liam had been married before. It wasn't exactly a secret, but he had never talked about it. Now, listening to the pain in his voice, she understood why. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Everything," he said bitterly. "She was having an affair for 2 years. With my business partner. They were planning to take half of everything I had built and disappear together." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Liam. I found out by accident." A private investigator I had hired to look into some missing funds discovered that Deborah was transferring money to offshore accounts. When I confronted her, he shook his head, running a hand through his hair. She didn't even try to deny it, just smiled and told me I was naive for thinking anyone could love a cold bastard like me for free. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt tears prick her eyes at the pain she could hear underlying every word. Suddenly, his behavior since their wedding night made perfect sense. The walls, the distance, the insistence on keeping their relationship purely business. It was all armor against being hurt again. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Liam turned to look at her, and the expression on his face nearly broke her heart. "Are you? Or are you just thinking about how you can use this information?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "How can you ask me that?" "Because in my experience, everyone has an angle, Emily. Everyone wants something. And the people who claim to care about you are often the ones who can hurt you the most." Emily stood up slowly, her own anger starting to build. "So that's what you think of me? That I'm just another Deborah waiting for my chance to destroy you?" "I don't know what to think," he admitted, and the honesty in his voice was more devastating than any accusation could have been. "Well, let me help you," she said, stepping closer to him. "I'm not her. I didn't choose to be here, but I am here, and I have done everything you asked. I have been polite, distant, perfect in public. I have never asked you for anything beyond basic human decency. So don't you dare compare me to someone who betrayed you." Liam stared at her, clearly taken aback by her intensity. "Emily, no. You listen to me now," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I understand that you were hurt. I understand that you don't trust easily. But I will not be punished for someone else's crimes. I will not be treated like a potential enemy when all I have done is try to make the best of a situation that neither of us chose." They stood facing each other in the fading light, both breathing hard, both raw from the honesty that had been unleashed between them. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the library in shades of gold and crimson. "She took everything," Liam said finally, his voice broken. 5 years of my life, half my fortune, and worst of all, she made me believe that I was incapable of being loved for who I am." Emily felt her anger drain away, replaced by something much deeper and more dangerous: compassion. She was wrong. "How can you know that? You barely know me." "Because," she said, stepping even closer, "the man who held me so gently our first night, who was so careful to make sure I felt safe, that man is capable of being loved. That man deserves to be loved." Something flickered in Liam's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear, or both. "That man is dangerous, Emily. He wants things he can't have." "Like what?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities and promises and threats all at once. Liam reached out almost involuntarily and touched her face with the tips of his fingers. "Like you," he whispered. "God help me, but I want you. Not just as a wife to show off." not just as part of a business arrangement. I want you for real, and that scares the hell out of me." Emily closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought telling her to run. "It scares me too." "Does it?" His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she could feel him trembling. "Because sometimes I think you see right through all my carefully constructed walls, and it makes me want to either pull you closer or run as far away as possible." When she opened her eyes, the look on his face nearly undid her. Vulnerability, desire, fear, hope, everything warring for dominance in those grey depths that had haunted her dreams for weeks. "Don't run," she whispered. "Emily." Her name was a warning, a plea, a prayer all at once. "Don't run, Liam. I'm not her. I won't hurt you." For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips and she could feel the pull between them like a physical force. But then he stepped back, his walls slamming into place so quickly that she gasped from the sudden cold. "I can't," he said roughly. "I won't survive if you turn out to be wrong." With that, he grabbed his whiskey and strode out of the library, leaving her standing alone in the fading light, wondering if she had just gained insight into his soul or lost him forever. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance she could hear thunder rumbling, a promise that the storm brewing between them was far from over. The storm arrived 2 nights after the conversation in the library, bringing with it furious winds that moaned through the mountains like lost souls. Emily was on her bedroom balcony, watching lightning tear through the dark sky, when she heard the front door slam with enough force to echo throughout the entire mansion. It was almost 11 at night. Liam had left that morning for a meeting in Charlotte and wasn't expected back until the next day. But there he was, climbing the stairs with heavy steps, his shoes leaving wet prints on the polished marble. She saw him stop in the hallway, hesitating at his own door before turning and walking in the opposite direction, toward her. Emily's heart raced when he knocked softly on the door. "Emily, are you awake?" There was something different in his voice, an urgency, a fragility she had never heard before. She opened the door and immediately noticed his state. Dark suit soaked by the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, grey eyes gleaming with an intensity that made her step back. "My God, you're soaked." "What happened?" she asked, noticing how he trembled slightly. "The meeting ended early," he said, but there was something more. His eyes couldn't fix on hers, as if he were fighting some internal battle. I couldn't stay away." The words hung between them like a dangerous confession. Emily felt her pulse quicken as she realized the truth behind them. He had driven through the storm because he couldn't bear to be separated from her for another night. "Liam, you need to get out of those wet clothes before you get sick," she said, trying to keep practicality in her voice while her mind screamed warnings about the intimacy of the situation. Can I come in? Just for a moment?" She nodded, stepping aside so he could pass. Her room was smaller than his, more cozy, with golden silk curtains and a fireplace that crackled softly. Liam stopped in the center of the space, dripping on the Persian rug, looking lost. "Stay there," she instructed, disappearing into the bathroom to get towels. When she returned, he hadn't moved, just stood there like a wet statue, staring at the flames in the fireplace. "Here," she said softly, approaching with a large towel. "Let me help." When she reached for his wet hair, he closed his eyes and sighed deeply, as if her touch were the only thing keeping him standing. The intimacy of the gesture, her carefully drying his face, his neck, while he remained completely still, was almost unbearable. "Emily," he murmured, his voice hoarse, "I shouldn't be here." "Then why are you?" she asked softly, her hands stopping their movement but remaining on his face. He opened his eyes, and what she saw there took her breath away. It wasn't just desire, it was desperation, need, as if she were air and he were drowning. "Because you're killing me," he confessed. "These past weeks, pretending I don't feel anything, keeping my distance, it's destroying me inside." "Then stop pretending," she whispered. "I can't. If I allow myself to feel all of this," he shook his head, as if fighting against himself, "I won't survive when you leave me." "Who said I'm going to leave you?" The question came out before she could censor it, loaded with promises neither of them was prepared to make. But as the words hung between them, Emily realized she had said them because they were true. "You don't understand," Liam said, his hands rising to cover hers on his face. "Deborah knew me for 5 years, and still she managed to destroy me. You've known me for a few weeks, and you already have enough power to completely annihilate me." "I'm not her," Emily said firmly, echoing the words she had said in the library. "No, you're not," he agreed, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You're worse. She wanted my money, my status. You see me. The real man behind all the armor, and somehow you still haven't run." Lightning illuminated the room, followed by thunder that made the windows shake. The storm was getting stronger, but neither of them noticed. They were lost in each other, in the charged space between them that pulsed with unspoken possibilities. "Maybe I'm not running because I don't want to," she said, her voice barely audible above the sound of rain beating against the windows. Something broke in Liam's expression at that moment. Years of careful control, of walls built brick by brick, of refusing to trust. Everything crumbled before the simple sincerity in her voice. "Emily," he whispered, her name like a prayer on his lips. She saw the exact moment he surrendered. His hands slid from hers to her waist, pulling her closer with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. She could feel the warmth of his body through his wet shirt, could see the raindrops still glistening on his eyelashes. "May I continue?" he asked, echoing the words he had whispered in Cape Haven, but this time loaded with so much more weight. This time, he wasn't just asking permission to touch her, he was asking permission to surrender completely. In response, she rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them until her lips were just a whisper away from his. "Yes," she murmured against his mouth. The kiss that followed wasn't like the first one in Cape Haven. Careful, exploratory, gentle. This was pure hunger, years of loneliness and pain pouring out in a moment of desperate connection. Liam kissed her as if she were his salvation, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her against him as if he couldn't have her close enough. Emily melted into his arms, every nerve ending in her body coming alive as he kissed her with an intensity that made her tremble. She could feel the change in him, the walls that had been in place for so long finally crumbling, leaving only the man underneath, vulnerable and desperate for connection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Liam rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I'm terrified," he confessed against her lips. "Me too," she admitted, her hands rising to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heart beating wildly. "But maybe we can be afraid together." He opened his eyes then, and what she saw there took her breath away again. It was love, not the careful attraction or controlled desire she had glimpsed before, but real, deep love, terrifying in its intensity. "For you have no idea what you're doing to me," he murmured, his hands tracing her face as if she were made of something precious and fragile. "Show me," she whispered, and he showed her. With trembling hands that revered every touch, with kisses that whispered promises neither dared speak aloud, with a tenderness that contrasted with the raging storm outside. When he led her to the bed, it was as if he were touching something sacred. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time, his hands framing her face in the golden light of the fireplace. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied, and saw the last of his walls crumble completely. What happened next was more than physical. It was a complete transformation. The cold, controlled man who had established rules and kept his distance disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who touched her as if she were a miracle, who whispered her name like a blessing, who surrendered so completely that she could feel the change happening in real time. When dawn finally arrived, finding them intertwined among rumpled sheets, the storm had passed, but the transformation that had happened during the night was permanent. Liam Blackwood, the ruthless businessman who had built walls to protect his heart, had become someone else entirely. And as Emily slept in his arms, her face soft in the morning light, he knew there was no going back. He had fallen in love with his wife, completely and irrevocably, but as he watched the shadows dance on the walls, one question remained. When the real world came knocking at their door again, would this new man he had become be strong enough to fight for what he had found? The golden morning light filtered through the silk curtains when Emily awakened, wrapped in strong arms that held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. For one perfect moment, she just lay there, breathing in Liam's woody scent, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against her back. Then she remembered where she was, in her own bed, with her husband, after a night that had changed everything between them. Panic began to set in. What if he woke up with regrets? What if daylight brought back the cold, distant man she had known for weeks? As if he could sense her tension, Liam stirred behind her, his voice husky with sleep. "Good morning." She turned in his arms, preparing herself for anything: rejection, regret, the return of carefully constructed walls. But what she found took her breath away. His grey eyes were soft, vulnerable, full of a tenderness she had never seen before. "How did you sleep?" he asked, his hand tracing lazily along her arm. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "And you?" A small but genuine smile touched his lips. "I couldn't remember the last time I slept so well, until last night." The relief she felt was so intense it almost made her cry. He wasn't running. He wasn't shutting down. The man who had surrendered in the darkness was still there in the light of day. "Liam," she began, but he silenced her words with a gentle kiss. "Don't say it was a mistake," he murmured against her lips. "Please, let me have this at least for a few more hours." "That's not what I was going to say," she replied, her hands rising to frame his face. "I was going to say that I don't regret it. Any of it." Something changed in his expression. Surprise, relief, and something deeper that made her heart race. "Even knowing this complicates everything." "Especially because of that," she said with conviction. "Liam, I don't want a marriage of convenience. Not anymore. I want you, the real man, not the edited version you showed the world." He studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for signs of lies or manipulation. When he found none, something in him relaxed completely. "You have no idea what you're asking for," he said softly. "The real man, he has scars, nightmares, moments when he can't trust his own shadow." "Then let me help heal them," she replied. "Let me show you that not everyone is going to hurt you." The next 2 weeks were a revelation. Liam began coming home earlier, finding excuses to work from the home office instead of going downtown. Dinners that had once been silent, formal events became long, intimate conversations about everything and nothing. He began to show her parts of himself he had kept hidden, how he really laughed when something genuinely amused him, how his eyes softened when he talked about the philanthropic projects he secretly funded, how he became almost shy when he received genuine affection. "Did you know he pays for the education of 50 underprivileged children?" Mrs. Chen said one afternoon when Emily found her preparing dinner. "And that there's an entire hospital in Guatemala that exists because of him?" "He never mentioned that," Emily replied, surprised but not shocked. She was beginning to understand that there were layers to Liam Blackwood she was only beginning to discover. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't talk about the good things he does," Mrs. Chen continued, smiling. "But since you arrived, he smiles more, laughs more, seems more alive." It was true. There was a different energy in the house now. The hallways that had once seemed cold and echoing now resonated with conversations and occasional laughter. Liam had begun showing her his favorite corners of the property, the secret garden where he went when he needed to think, the observatory on the top floor that offered breathtaking views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Deborah hated this place," he said one evening as they walked through the moonlit gardens. "She said it was too isolated, too quiet. She wanted us to live in the city." "And you?" Emily asked, slipping her hand into his. "What did you want?" "This," he replied simply, gesturing to the mountains around them. "Peace, silence, a place where I could be myself." "And can you be yourself?" He stopped walking, turning to face her in the silver light. "With you? Yes. By some miracle, yes. But not everything was perfect." There were moments when Liam still fought against years of conditioning, when the walls began to rise automatically before he consciously tore them down. There were nights when he woke in cold sweats from nightmares about betrayal and abandonment, and she soothed him back to sleep with gentle words and tender touch. "Sometimes I wonder when you're going to realize you can do better," he confessed one night after a particularly bad nightmare. "Better than what?" she asked, tracing calming circles on his chest. than a broken man who can't even trust his own wife without questioning her motives. Emily propped herself up on her elbow to look him in the eyes. "Liam Blackwood, you listen carefully. I don't want better. I want you. All of you. The good parts, the hurt parts, the parts that are still learning to trust again. Do you understand?" But the truth was that the outside world was beginning to invade their perfect bubble. Important meetings couldn't be postponed indefinitely. Social commitments that had been cancelled during their honeymoon needed to be fulfilled. "We have to go to the Morrison Foundation charity ball on Friday," Liam said one morning over breakfast, and Emily could see the reluctance in his eyes. "It'll be our first real public appearance as a couple," she observed. "Yes, and the whole world will be watching, looking for cracks, trying to figure out if our marriage is real or just a convenient arrangement." Emily laughed, reaching for his hand across the table. "Well, we'll have to disappoint them then." "What do you mean?" "I mean it'll be impossible for anyone looking at us to doubt that we're completely in love with each other." The word love hung between them like a confession. Neither had said it out loud yet, though it was obvious to any casual observer. Liam squeezed her hand, his eyes intensifying. "We are, aren't we?" he said softly. "In love." "Hopelessly," she confirmed, feeling her heart race at the admission. "Good," he said, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss her fingers. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." But even as they exchanged promises over coffee and morning light, neither of them knew that forces were already moving to test those promises in ways they couldn't imagine. In an office across town, documents were being prepared, phone calls were being made, and a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes was making plans that threatened to destroy everything Liam and Emily had built. But for now, in the mountain mansion where love had finally found a home, they had peace. And sometimes in life's most precious moments, peace is enough to make anyone believe that happy endings are possible. The question was, when the storm came, and it would come, would this newfound love be strong enough to survive? Emily stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands for the third time in 5 minutes, as if the 2 pink lines might magically disappear if she wished hard enough. But they remained stubbornly visible, an unmistakable declaration that would change everything. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Sitting on the cold marble floor of the master suite bathroom, she had moved into Liam's room 2 weeks earlier. She tried to process the enormity of the situation. It wasn't that they hadn't been careful, but apparently not every precaution was foolproof. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house. Liam was home earlier than usual, probably eager to continue the conversation they had started at breakfast about expanding his charitable foundation. How could she tell him this? How would he react? "Emily, where are you?" His voice echoed up the stairs. "Up here," she called back, her voice sounding strangely normal to her own ears. "I'll be down in a minute." She hid the test in the vanity drawer, along with the box, deciding she needed time to find the right words. But when she went downstairs and saw Liam in the living room, removing his tie with that soft smile he reserved only for her, guilt hit her like a punch. "How was your day?" he asked, approaching to kiss her gently. It was a ritual they had developed, these small moments of reconnection when he came home. "It was interesting," she said, trying to keep her voice casual as she stepped away from his arms. If he touched her now, if she melted into his embrace as she always did, she would end up telling him everything before she was ready. Liam noticed the change immediately. His grey eyes narrowed slightly, reading the nuances of her behavior with the precision of someone who had learned to study her every expression. "Did something happen?" he asked, his voice carrying that caution that still appeared when he sensed something might be wrong between them. "Not exactly," Emily replied, walking to the window overlooking the gardens. "Liam, can I ask you a hypothetical question?" He joined her at the window, but maintained a careful distance. "Of course. What do you think about children?" The question seemed to catch him completely off guard. He blinked as if processing not just the words, but all the implications behind them. "Children," he repeated slowly. "You mean in general? Or in general? Have you ever thought about having kids?" Liam was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the gardens where the afternoon light created golden shadows. "With Deborah, we talked about it sometimes. It was more of an expectation than a real desire, you know? Part of the perfect life plan she had mapped out. Emily felt her stomach clench. And now? He turned to look at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. Honestly, I never allowed myself to think about it. After the divorce, the idea of bringing a child into this world, of being responsible for shaping them, it terrified me. Why? Because what if I was like my father? The admission came out so low she almost didn't hear it. Cold, distant, more concerned with business than family. What if I didn't know how to love a child the way they deserve? Emily's heart broke a little. Liam, you're not like that. The man I know who holds me when I have nightmares, who remembers how I like my coffee, who cares so much about strangers' happiness that he funds entire schools, that man would be an incredible father. Liam studied her with growing care. Why are we talking about this, Emily? She took a deep breath, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. Because I took a test today. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily watched as the words registered, saw the exact moment when their full meaning hit him. Liam went completely still, his eyes widening, his face paling slightly. A test, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. 2 lines, she confirmed, her own hands shaking now. I'm pregnant, Liam. For a moment that seemed like eternity, he just stared at her. Emily could see his mind working, processing, calculating, the businessman in him trying to analyze the situation from every angle. But then something else took over, something deeper and more primal. Pregnant, he said again, this time with wonder. His hands moved instinctively toward her, stopping only when he realized she was still tense, waiting for his reaction. I know we didn't plan this, she began quickly. I know it complicates everything, that we haven't talked about having children, that maybe it's too soon for Emily. His voice cut through her words, firm but gentle. Stop. She stopped, biting her lower lip as she waited for the verdict that would change everything. You're scared, he observed, not as a question, but as a statement. Why are you scared? Because, she swallowed hard. Because I don't know how you feel about this. I don't know if you want this. I don't know if... This time he interrupted her with actions instead of words, closing the distance between them and pulling her into his arms. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You think I wouldn't want this? You think I wouldn't want a family with the woman I love? I didn't know, she whispered against his chest. You never talked about wanting children, because I never knew I wanted them until now. He pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. Until this moment, I didn't know it was possible to want something so much it physically hurts. Really? She asked, barely daring to believe. Emily, when I was married to Deborah, the idea of having children was abstract. It was something people did because it was expected. But the idea of having a child with you, of starting a family with you, he paused, his voice catching slightly. It's terrifying and wonderful and perfect all at once. The tears she had been holding back finally fell, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. So you're happy? Happy? Liam laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the air between them. Emily, I'm ecstatic. I'm terrified, but I'm ecstatic. He placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach, and the reverence in his touch made her start crying again. There's really a baby in there? He asked in wonder. According to the test, yes. And according to the fact that I've been nauseous every morning for the past week. Morning sickness, he said, as if testing the words. God, I'm an idiot. I should have noticed. You're not an idiot. It took me a while to realize, too. Liam knelt before her, placing his hands on her belly and resting his forehead against it. Hi, baby, he whispered, and the tenderness in his voice nearly undid her. I'm your daddy, and I promise I'm going to do better than my father did with me. I promise you'll never wonder if you're loved. Emily ran her hands through his hair, watching this powerful, feared man completely melt at the prospect of becoming a father. We're going to do this together, she said softly. You don't have to do this alone. He looked up at her, and the love she saw there was so intense it left her breathless. How am I going to thank you for this, for giving us a family? You don't need to thank me. We did this together. Emily, he said, standing and taking her face in his hands. I love you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone, and now you're giving me the most precious thing in the world. I love you too, she whispered, and our baby is going to have the best parents in the world. When they kissed, it was a seal of promise, not just of the love they shared, but of the future they would build together. Liam held her as if she were made of glass, conscious now that she carried something infinitely precious. But as night fell over the mountain mansion, neither of them knew that their perfect happiness would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. Because sometimes, when life finally gives you everything you've always wanted, that's exactly when the darkest forces decide to try to take it away from you. For now, though, they had this night. A night of promises whispered to the baby growing between them, of plans made in soft voices, and the absolute certainty that, whatever happened, they would face it together. The Asheville Country Club had never seemed as intimidating as it did that Saturday night. The golden lights emanating from the main ballroom windows created a welcoming glow that contrasted sharply with the anxiety growing in Emily's stomach. She adjusted the navy blue dress Liam had chosen for her, elegant but not too flashy, sophisticated enough to impress, but conservative enough not to give the gossips ammunition. "You look beautiful," Liam murmured as they walked toward the entrance, his hand holding hers firmly. He was impeccable in his black tuxedo, every inch the powerful businessman the world knew, but she could feel the tension in his muscles. "I'm nervous," she admitted, stopping for a moment to take a deep breath. At 3 months pregnant, she wasn't showing yet, but the constant awareness that she was carrying Liam's child made her feel simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable. "I'll be by your side all night," he promised, turning to face her. "And if anyone says anything inappropriate, you'll smile politely and take me to dance," Emily completed, echoing the words they had practiced. "Remember, tonight isn't about proving anything to them. It's about us." Liam nodded, but she could see the warrior gleam in his grey eyes. He was ready for battle if necessary. The ballroom was packed with Asheville's elite and beyond, politicians, CEOs, old money heirs, and their perfectly coiffed wives. Conversations stopped when Liam and Emily entered, replaced by whispers and barely concealed stares. Emily could feel the weight of expectations, curiosity, and yes, judgment. "Mr. Blackwood," a jovial voice cut through the murmur. Senator Richardson, a portly man with a smile that never reached his eyes, approached with his wife Margaret, whose icy blue gaze immediately fixed on Emily like a laser. "Senator, Mrs. Richardson," Liam responded smoothly. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Emily." "Charming," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Tell me, dear, where did you two meet? Such a romantic story, I'm sure." Emily felt the trap immediately. The question seemed innocent enough, but everyone knew that Liam and Emily's marriage had been sudden, unexpected. Any answer she gave would be dissected and analyzed. "Actually, we met through mutual friends," Emily said calmly. "Sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them." "Indeed," Margaret replied, her smile sharp. "And such a quick courtship. You must have swept him off his feet immediately." Before Emily could respond, a familiar laugh cut through the conversation. She turned to see Victoria Ashford approaching, a woman she recognized from society magazines, tall and willowy with platinum blonde hair and a reputation for being the informal queen of Asheville's social scene. "Darling Margaret, don't interrogate the poor girl," Victoria said, but her eyes were already studying Emily like a scientist examining a specimen. "We're all just so curious about Liam's surprising choice." The word surprising hung in the air like a challenge. Emily felt her cheeks warm, but before she could respond, Liam's arm tightened around her waist. "Surprising how?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual, but carrying an edge everyone recognized. "Oh, don't be defensive, Liam," Victoria laughed. "It's just that we expected, well, someone more like Deborah, established, connected, someone from our world." The implication was clear. Emily didn't belong. She wasn't good enough. She was an interloper who had somehow tricked her way into their exclusive circle. "I see," Liam said coldly. "And what exactly is our world, Victoria?" But before Victoria could answer, another voice joined the conversation. "I think what Victoria means," said James Morrison, the event's host, "is that you've always been so private about your personal life. This marriage came as such a surprise to all of us." "As did my divorce," Liam pointed out. "I wasn't aware that I needed approval from a committee for my personal decisions." The tension was becoming palpable. Other guests were starting to edge closer, sensing drama. Emily realized that this was exactly what they had wanted to avoid, a public confrontation that would give the gossip mill food for months. "Liam," she said quietly, placing a gentle hand on his arm, "would you like to dance?" For a moment she thought he might refuse, might continue this verbal sparring match that could only end badly. But then he looked down at her, and something in her calm demeanor seemed to ground him. "I'd love to," he said, offering her his arm. As they made their way to the dance floor, she could hear Victoria's voice behind them. "Well, she certainly has him trained already." The comment was designed to carry, to wound. Emily felt her spine stiffen, but she kept walking. On the dance floor, Liam pulled her into his arms, and for a moment the rest of the room faded away. "I should have said something," he murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "Should have put them in their place." "You did exactly what you needed to do," she replied. "You showed them that I matter more to you than their opinions." "You do. God, Emily, you matter more to me than anything." They danced in comfortable silence for a few minutes, lost in each other despite being surrounded by people who clearly wanted them to fail. But when the song ended, reality crashed back. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through their moment. Margaret Richardson had approached, flanked by two other women Emily didn't recognize. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but there are some rumors circulating." "What kind of rumors?" Liam asked, his voice dangerous. "About why you got married so quickly. Some people are saying—" Margaret's smile was predatory now. "Well, they're saying maybe there was a reason for the rush." The implication was clear and cruel. They were suggesting that Emily had trapped Liam with a pregnancy, that she was nothing more than a gold digger who had gotten lucky. Emily felt the familiar surge of anger, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't just about her, it was about her family, her unborn child, and the life she and Liam were building together. "You're absolutely right," she said, stepping forward with a smile that was all teeth. There was a reason for the rush. Margaret's eyes lit up with triumph, clearly thinking she had gotten the confession she was fishing for. "You see," Emily continued, her voice carrying clearly through the room, "when you find someone who loves you completely, who sees you for who you really are and accepts all of it, the good, the bad, the complicated, you don't waste time with games. You don't wait for some arbitrary timeline that makes other people comfortable. You grab hold of that love with both hands because you know it's rare." She turned to look at Liam, and the love in her eyes was so obvious that even the most cynical observer couldn't doubt it. "My husband," she continued, the word carrying pride and possessiveness, "could have married anyone. Any woman in this room would have said yes, but he chose me. Not because I trapped him, not because I offer anything more than my heart. He chose me because when I look at him, I don't see the powerful businessman or the bank account or the social status. I see the man who holds me when I can't sleep, who remembers exactly how I like my coffee, who would give up everything he has before letting anyone hurt me." The room had gone completely quiet. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was on them. "So, yes," Emily said, turning back to Margaret with a smile that was pure steel. "There was a reason for the rush. The reason is that when you find true love, only a fool lets it slip away." For a moment that seemed like eternity. Nobody spoke. Then slowly someone started to clap. Then another person. Within seconds half the room was applauding. Liam stared at his wife in complete awe. This woman, his woman, had just taken on all of Asheville society and won. She had defended their love, their marriage, their family, with a grace and strength that left him breathless. "I love you," he whispered in her ear, pulling her close. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Now shall we give them something else to talk about?" Without waiting for an answer, she kissed him right there in front of everyone, deep and passionate and completely unapologetic. When they broke apart, the applause was deafening. Victoria Ashford approached them, her expression grudgingly respectful. "That was impressive," she admitted. "Perhaps I misjudged you." Perhaps you did, Emily replied graciously. But I understand. It's hard to trust something that seems too good to be true. The truth is, I'm the luckiest woman in this room because I get to go home with him. As the evening wound down and they said their goodbyes, Emily realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the outsider trying to fit in. She was Liam's wife carrying his child, and she had proven that she belonged wherever she chose to stand. "You were magnificent tonight," Liam told her as they drove home through the mountain roads. "I have never been more proud to be standing beside anyone. We're a team," she said simply. "That's what marriage means. We face the world together." "Always?" he asked. "Always," she promised. But even as they made that promise, neither of them knew that their greatest test was yet to come. Because in a small apartment across town, a woman with blonde hair and bitter eyes was watching news coverage of the gala on her laptop, planning her next move. Deborah Blackwood wasn't done with them yet. The first sign that something was wrong came on a cold Monday in December, when Emily was 5 months pregnant. She was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, one hand unconsciously caressing her rounded belly, when she heard Liam's tense voice coming from the office. "What do you mean she's contesting the divorce?" His voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "That was finalized 3 years ago, Jonathan." Emily stopped stirring the eggs, a sudden chill spreading through her chest. Deborah. It had to be about Deborah. "I don't care what lawyer she hired," Liam continued, his voice growing more dangerous with each word. "The agreement was signed by both parties. She received her compensation and agreed to the terms." Emily approached the office door, her heart pounding hard. Through the crack she could see Liam pacing back and forth, the phone pressed against his ear, his free hand running through his hair in frustration. "Claiming coercion?" Liam laughed bitterly. "That's ridiculous, Jonathan. She had her own legal representation. She was perfectly lucid when she signed." A long pause, during which Liam's face visibly paled. "DNA? What do you mean DNA test?" Emily felt her blood freeze. The baby. Deborah was coming after the baby that hadn't even been born yet. "Find everything you can about this Dr. Martinez," Liam ordered coldly. "And I want a meeting with our legal team this afternoon. If Deborah wants war, she'll get it." When he hung up the phone, Emily pushed the door open gently. "Liam?" He turned, and the expression on his face made her take a step back. It was the same cold mask he had worn before they fell in love, armor against the outside world. But when his eyes met hers, the mask cracked slightly. "You heard," he said, not as a question. "Enough." She approached carefully, as if he were a wounded animal that might flee. "What does she want, Liam?" "Everything." His voice was empty, defeated. "She wants to annul the divorce, claiming she was coerced into signing. She wants half of everything I've built in the last 3 years. And..." He stopped, looking at her belly. "She's questioning the baby's paternity." "What?" Emily felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "But that's insane. How can she..." "She hired a private investigator. Apparently there are photos of you with me before our official wedding. She's claiming we were having an affair during my marriage to her." "But that's a lie!" Emily exploded. "We never met before our wedding day." "I know that. You know that. But she has a doctor who's willing to testify that the conception dates coincide with a business trip I took to New York. A trip that, according to her, included secret meetings with you." Emily sat heavily in the nearest chair, her hands trembling. "She's fabricating evidence." "Of course she is, but it'll take time and money to prove that. And meanwhile..." Liam punched the desk, making the papers jump. "She got a temporary restraining order freezing half my assets." "How is that possible?" "Because she claimed I hid assets during the original divorce, that the marriage to you was a sham to protect my money from a possible future challenge." Emily felt nauseous, and it wasn't morning sickness. "So she's saying our marriage is fake?" "Worse than that." Liam knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "She's saying you're a con artist I hired to pretend to be my wife, and that the baby belongs to another man." Tears burned Emily's eyes. "Will people believe that?" "Some will, especially after the reaction we had at the country club. They'll say we protested too much, that we were trying to convince ourselves as much as them." Emily was quiet for a long moment, processing the enormity of the situation. Then an iron determination settled in her chest. What do we need to do? Liam blinked, surprised. Emily, you don't understand. This is going to be public, dirty, invasive. They're going to dig into every aspect of our lives. They'll question everything about you, about us. I understand perfectly, she interrupted. I'm asking what we need to do to fight this. We? Did you think I was going to run? She stood up, placing her hands on her belly. Liam Blackwood, this woman is attacking our family, our child. Do you really think I'm going to let this slide? For a moment, he just looked at her with admiration. She's going to come after you with everything. She'll try to destroy your reputation, your family. Then she better be prepared for a fight, Emily replied fiercely. Because I'm not the scared little girl who married you out of obligation. I'm your wife, the mother of your child, and nobody is going to destroy our family without going through me first. The next few weeks were a nightmare of depositions, investigations, and sensational headlines. Blackwood ear in paternity scandal, screamed the tabloids. Fake marriage or true love, speculated the magazines. Deborah appeared on every talk show that would have her, always impeccable in her designer suits, crying perfectly timed tears as she told her story of betrayal and abandonment. I loved Liam with all my heart, she sobbed to a sympathetic host. And to find out he was having an affair during our marriage, that he used this girl to hide his assets from me. It's devastating. Emily watched it all from home, her fury growing with each well-crafted lie. Liam tried to make her stop watching, but she refused. I need to know what she's saying, she insisted. I need to understand how she's building her version of the story. This is only hurting you. What's hurting me is that people believe her, Emily shot back, that they think our love is a sham. The situation worsened when Deborah's investigator presented photographs that supposedly showed Emily in New York months before their wedding. The photos were blurry, clearly manipulated, but convincing enough to create doubt. How did she get these photos? Emily asked Liam's lawyer during a tense meeting. They're probably of a woman who looks like you, Jonathan replied wearily. Or they were digitally altered, but it'll take time to prove that. Time we don't have, Liam murmured. The jury of public opinion is already deciding. That's when Mrs. Chen appeared at the conference room door, looking troubled. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but there are reporters at the front door and... She hesitated. I got a strange call today, someone offering money for information about the family. Liam stood up abruptly. How much? $50,000, for anything that proves your marriage is fake. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Emily felt a sudden tightness in her stomach. Not physical pain, but the crushing weight of what they were facing. This isn't going to end, is it? She asked softly. It will, Liam said with iron determination, because we're going to fight with everything we have. And when we're done, Deborah will regret trying to destroy our family. But that night, as they lay in bed, Emily turned to him in the darkness. Liam, she whispered, are you sure it's worth it? All this suffering, all this exposure. Maybe it would be better to just give her what she wants. Never, he replied immediately, pulling her closer. Never, Emily, this isn't about money, it's about our family. It's about not letting a liar destroy everything we've built. He placed his hand on her belly, where the baby was kicking gently. This baby is mine. You are my wife, and I will fight until my last breath to protect that. But as they held each other in the darkness, neither of them knew that the worst was yet to come. Because Deborah Blackwood wasn't just trying to get the money back. She was trying to completely destroy the life of the man who had dared to find happiness without her. And she was just getting started. The day of the trial dawned grey and cold, with heavy clouds promising snow. Emily stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue blazer that barely closed over her 7-month belly. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied lipstick. A soft rose tone that Liam had said made her look radiant and confident. Are you ready? Liam appeared behind her in the mirror, impeccable in his charcoal suit. But she could see the tension in his grey eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders that revealed how nervous he really was. As ready as I can be, she replied, turning to face him. You? I'm ready for this to be over, he said, gently pulling her into his arms. I'm ready for us to just be us again. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Journalists, onlookers, and those who simply wanted to see the drama unfold filled the benches. Emily felt dozens of eyes on her as she walked down the aisle, her hand firmly intertwined with Liam's. Deborah was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with studied elegance. She wore a conservative black suit and had styled her hair in a low chignon that made her look simultaneously vulnerable and professional. When her eyes met Emily's, she smiled. A cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Harrison began, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom, "we are here to determine the validity of various claims presented by Mrs. Deborah Blackwood against her ex-husband, Liam Blackwood, and his current wife, Emily Blackwood." The first few hours were brutal. Deborah's lawyer, an oily man named Preston Wilde, presented his version of events with a theatricality that made Emily's stomach turn. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he declared dramatically, "you will see evidence of an elaborate conspiracy to defraud my client of her rightful claim to marital assets. You will see how Liam Blackwood, aided by this young woman, orchestrated a fake marriage to hide assets." He pointed at Emily with a theatrical gesture. "Look closely at this woman, young, beautiful, conveniently pregnant at the perfect moment to solidify her position. But is the baby she carries really Liam Blackwood's, or is it part of an elaborate sham?" Emily felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give Deborah the satisfaction of seeing her break. Then it was Jonathan's turn to present the defense. Tall, distinguished, with a voice that commanded respect, he stood with calm confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "you will hear a very different story today. Not a story of conspiracy and fraud, but a story of true love that blossomed under unlikely circumstances. You will see evidence, real evidence, not speculation, that proves unequivocally that Liam and Emily Blackwood have a genuine marriage based on mutual love." The first day was devoted to Deborah's testimony. She cried at the right moments, her voice trembled at appropriate times, and she painted a picture of herself as a devoted wife, betrayed by the man she loved. "I knew something was wrong," she said, delicately dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Liam was distant, secretive. When I confronted him about his frequent trips to New York, he said it was just business. But I knew. A wife always knows." "And when did you discover Mrs. Emily Blackwood?" Preston asked leadingly. "It was devastating," Deborah whispered. "Seeing the photographs, knowing he was having an affair during our marriage, it was like my world fell apart." Emily watched it all with growing horror. Deborah was convincing, almost believable. If she didn't know the truth, she might have believed the performance too. But then came Jonathan's cross-examination, and everything changed. "Mrs. Blackwood," he began calmly, "you mentioned frequent business trips to New York. Do you have records of these trips?" "Well, I didn't necessarily keep detailed record." "Interesting, because our records show that Liam Blackwood was not in New York on the dates you mentioned. In fact, he was in meetings here in Asheville, with dozens of witnesses." Deborah faltered slightly. Maybe I confused the dates. Or maybe you fabricated the entire story," Jonathan suggested mildly. "Tell me, Mrs. Blackwood, do you know a Dr. Ricardo Martinez?" The color drained from Deborah's face. Not immediately." "Dr. Martinez is the doctor who allegedly confirmed the conception dates to support your claims, a doctor who, incidentally, had his license revoked 3 months ago for falsifying medical records." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Emily felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. Jonathan wasn't finished. "And those photographs that allegedly show my client in New York. Our experts determined they were digitally manipulated, using images of a different woman entirely." Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of Deborah's case. But the final blow came when Jonathan called a surprise witness. "I'd like to call James Morrison to the stand." Emily recognized the name. He was the host of the gala where she had defended her marriage so eloquently. He was also apparently a longtime friend of Liam's. "Mr. Morrison," Jonathan began, "were you present at a dinner party at Liam Blackwood's home in October 3 years ago?" "Yes, I was." "And did you witness a conversation between Mr. Blackwood and his then-wife, Deborah?" "I did. She was upset about the prenuptial agreement she had signed. She said, and I quote, 'I'll find a way to get what's mine, even if I have to destroy him to get it." Deborah's face went white. Her attorney objected frantically, but the damage was done. But the moment that really sealed the case came when Liam himself took the stand. Jonathan led him through the timeline of his relationship with Emily, asking him to describe their first meeting, their wedding night, the development of their feelings. "Mr. Blackwood," Jonathan said, "in your own words, tell the jury about your relationship with your wife." Liam looked directly at Emily, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with such raw honesty that the entire courtroom fell silent. "When I married Emily, I thought it would be a business arrangement. I had been so hurt, so closed off after my divorce, that I didn't believe in real love anymore. But Emily, she saw through all my walls. She was patient when I was difficult, kind when I was cruel, and strong when I was weak." His voice grew softer, more intimate. "She didn't marry me for my money or my status. She married me because somehow she saw something in me worth loving. And every single day since then, she has proven that our love is real in 1,000 small ways." "And the baby?" Jonathan prompted. "Our baby," Liam said, his eyes moving to Emily's swollen belly, "is the greatest gift I could ever receive. Not because it's mine biologically, although I have no doubt that it is, but because it's a symbol of the love we've built together." When Preston tried to cross-examine Liam, to shake his story or find contradictions, Liam remained unshakable. Every answer was consistent, heartfelt, obviously true. But the final nail in Deborah's case came from a source nobody expected, her own investigator. Called by Jonathan in a surprise move, the private investigator admitted that Deborah had offered him an additional $100,000 to create evidence when the real evidence didn't support her claims. "She specifically asked me to find a woman who looked like Mrs. Blackwood and photograph her in compromising situations," he testified reluctantly. "When I refused, she threatened to ruin my business." By the time closing arguments began, it was clear to everyone that Deborah's case was falling apart. But Jonathan didn't take any chances. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said in his final statement, "you have seen a woman's scorned attempt to destroy a family out of spite and greed. You've seen fabricated evidence, bribed witnesses, and calculated lies. But you have also seen something beautiful, genuine love between two people who found each other against all odds." He gestured to Liam and Emily. "Look at them. Really look at them. Do you see actors playing roles, or do you see a husband and wife who are facing the biggest challenge of their lives together, with unwavering support for each other?" The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood with the verdict. "In the matter of Deborah Blackwood versus Liam Blackwood, we find for the defendant on all counts. Furthermore, we recommend that Mrs. Deborah Blackwood be held liable for court costs and damages in the amount of $2 million. The courtroom exploded. Emily felt Liam's arms around her, felt his tears in her hair as he whispered, "It's over. It's finally over." But even as they celebrated their victory, Emily knew that the real triumph wasn't in the court's decision. It was in the fact that through it all, through the lies, the accusations, the public humiliation, their love had not only survived, but grown stronger. As they walked out of the courthouse into the crisp autumn air, Emily felt their baby kick strongly, as if celebrating too. The future that had seemed so uncertain just hours before now stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility. "What do we do now?" she asked Liam as photographers clicked away around them. "Now," he said, kissing her softly despite all the cameras, "we go home and we live our lives together." And for the first time in months, Emily believed that they really could. 4 years later, the mountain mansion had been completely transformed. Where once cold, formal silence had reigned, now children's laughter echoed, little feet ran through marble hallways, and there was the joyful chaos of a house truly inhabited by love. Emily was in the kitchen decorating a dinosaur-shaped birthday cake when she felt small arms wrap around her legs. "Mommy, Daddy said I can help with the candles." Michael, or Mickey, as everyone called him, looked up at her with his father's grey eyes, but with a radiant smile that was all his own. At 4 years old, he was a perfect mix of both, Liam's determination and Emily's gentleness. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, lifting him up so he could reach the cake, "but be careful not to lick the frosting before the party." "I wasn't going to do that," Mickey protested with exaggerated innocence, a blue chocolate smudge already at the corner of his mouth. "Of course not," Liam said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with Sophie in his arms. At 2 years old, their little daughter was a perfect miniature of Emily, with curly golden hair and green eyes that sparkled with mischief. "Daddy!" Mickey shouted, reaching his arms toward his father. "Look at the cake me and Mommy made!" "It's incredible, champ," Liam said, passing Sophie to Emily and picking up his son. "I think this is going to be the best birthday party ever." Emily watched husband and son interact with the same warmth in her chest that she felt every day for the past 4 years. Liam had become exactly the father she always knew he could be, present, loving, involved in every detail of the children's lives. "Mommy, when are people coming?" Sophie asked, playing with Emily's necklace. "In a little while, princess. Should we put on your new dress?" The party was an absolute success. The garden was full of children running among colorful decorations, parents chatting animatedly, and the kind of genuine joy that reminded Emily how good life was. Mrs. Chen, now officially part of the family, more like a grandmother than an employee, was on the porch watching the chaos with a satisfied smile. "Very different from how it used to be," she commented, when Emily joined her for a moment. "Very different," Emily agreed, watching Liam chase a group of children through the garden, roaring like a dinosaur while they screamed with delight. "Sometimes I can barely remember how we used to be." "You were 2 people afraid to love," Mrs. Chen said wisely. "Now you're a family." Later, after the guests had gone home and the children were tucked into bed, Liam and Emily found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear mountain sky. "Happy?" Liam asked, pulling her closer. "Incredibly," she replied, snuggling into his arms. "You? Happier than I ever thought possible," he admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real." "It's real," she assured him, gently kissing his neck. "Our life, our family, our love. It's all real." They stayed in comfortable silence for a moment, just enjoying the peace of the moment. Then Emily took a deep breath, knowing it was time to share the news she had kept all day. "Liam," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" he asked, but there was something in his tone that suggested he already suspected. "Well," she turned in his arms so she could see his face. "Remember when you said our family was complete?" His eyes widened slightly. "Emily, it seems it wasn't as complete as we thought," she said with a smile that lit up her entire face. "I'm pregnant again." For a moment, Liam was completely still. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, the same smile she had fallen in love with years ago, but now loaded with 4 years of shared happiness. "Really?" he whispered. "Really? 8 weeks." Liam swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like teenagers. When he set her back down, his eyes were shining with unshed tears. "God, Emily, how do you keep giving me everything I always wanted but never knew I needed?" "Because that's what people who love each other do," she replied simply. "They build a life together, one surprise at a time." "Mickey and Sophie are going to be thrilled," he said, his hands moving instinctively to her still flat belly. "Or they'll be terribly jealous," Emily laughed. "Either way, we'll figure it out together." "Together," Liam repeated, and the word carried all the weight of a promise kept through years of joys and challenges. As the night progressed, they talked about the future, about baby names and nurseries, about how they would tell the children and when they would reveal it to the world. But mostly they just marveled at the miracle of their growing family. "You know what amazes me most," Emily said, when they finally decided to go inside. "What?" "How it all started with an arranged marriage between 2 strangers and became this." She gestured to the house filled with evidence of their intertwined lives, family photos on the walls, toys scattered in corners, small shoes next to large ones by the door. "We weren't strangers for very long," Liam observed, kissing her forehead. "I think our souls recognized each other from the very first moment." "Do you believe in that? In soulmates?" "I didn't used to," he admitted. "But then you came into my life and showed me that some things are too big to be explained by logic. Sometimes you just have to accept the miracle." Later, lying in the bed they had shared for 4 years, Emily watched Liam sleep. Even in sleep, he kept a protective hand over her, a habit he had developed during her first pregnancy and never abandoned. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the initial reluctance, the walls they had torn down one brick at a time, the storms they had faced and overcome together. She thought about Deborah, who had tried to destroy what they had built, only to discover that true love couldn't be broken by lies or greed. Most importantly, she thought about the future that stretched ahead of them, decades of shared mornings, birthdays and graduations, small daily joys and big life milestones. A life built not on contracts or convenience, but on the solid foundation of genuine love and mutual commitment. When Liam stirred in his sleep, murmuring her name, she smiled in the darkness. Some people wait their whole lives for their happily ever after. She had found hers in an arranged marriage with a stranger who turned out to be the love of her life. And as new life grew within her, carrying the promise of even more love and joy, Emily knew their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning the next chapter of a life that had proven richer and more beautiful than any fairy tale could promise. Because the best happily ever afters aren't the ones that end at the altar. They're the ones that continue being built, day after day, year after year, through the transformative power of true love. And in the mountain mansion where it all began, a family slept in peace, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, a love that would last a lifetime. Sometimes the best love stories begin disguised as cold agreements. Emily and Liam discovered that the heart doesn't understand contracts, it only knows how to love. From initial fear to deep love, they proved that when two souls meet, not even the most painful past can prevent the blossoming of a bright future. Because true love doesn't need to be perfect from the start, it just needs to be real, brave, and willing to grow. And you? Do you believe that love can transform any situation? If this love story touched your heart, please leave your like so we can continue bringing romances that warm the soul. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to keep spreading love throughout the world.